This is Seymour Rocks reporting from Down Under. Today is just one of those days, just like every other day, I guess. We've got these so-called impeachment proceedings in the United States where fact has been called conspiracy theory and theory is called fact. So I've just come off watching what I think is the best kind of interpretation of all of this. I spent an hour and a half listening, and it's so important that I feel that I need to share. And a couple of things from the broadcast in particular. There was a press conference by, I think, the Prosecutor General or whatever he is in Ukraine, talking about Burisma and talking about Hunter Biden, and then the thing that they say is a conspiracy theory. You've got Joe Biden himself bragging how he managed to give the president of Ukraine 6 hours or something to sack the prosecutor, so that Hunter Biden wouldn't be revealed for what he was. So I think those are two absolutely essential things. So I am going to kind of present an introduction from the True News people, these two items, and then I may even share the audio of the rest of it because I just believe it's incredibly important. Yeah, so that's where we are.
What has transpired, and as usual, what is not amazing is how the American news media works overtime not to tell the American people what's really going on. So let's start with this this Interfax story. And I read this last night. I was in the Los Angeles LAX airport when I read this. And Interfax, which is a Russian news agency, said that Ukrainian members of parliament have demanded that the presidents of Ukraine and the United States investigate suspicions of the legalization of $7.4 billion by the family of ex-President
Viktor Yanukovych.
Yanukovych, through the American investment fund, Franklin Templeton Investments, which they said has ties to the Democratic Party in the United States. So, Edward, what is this statement? What is this press conference that happened?
So the press conference was actually held between two members of Ukraine's parliament. The names are Andrei Dukak and Alexander Dubinsky. Now, these two officials, what they claim is they got a leaked memo, basically of what's referred to in Ukraine as a criminal referral. They call it a statement of suspicion, a signed suspicion. This is a criminal referral. In this referral, the $7.4 billion criminal laundering scheme involving Franklin Templeton Investment and the former, and actually both formers, Petro Poroshenko, the government of Petro Poroshenko, and the government of Yanukovych in Ukraine, in what are arguably the biggest laundering corruption scheme Ukraine has seen in the history of the country.
In the story, according to this Ukrainian story, it's specifically saying that over $16 million went to Hunter Biden, the son,
and his partners.
And his partners, the son of Vice President Joe Biden. And they specifically said that the $16+ million that allegedly went to Joe Biden and his partners did not originate with legal profits by Burisma Energy, but were gathered through criminal enterprises
and then
laundered through the company.
Right.
So basically, in this sense, Burisma is taking in criminal money, mafia money, maybe even illicit arms trafficking money, anything. Criminal means a slew of things.
Yes.
Taking in the money, then Franklin Templeton Investments was allowing the money to be transferred to them. Franklin Templeton Investments was then using that money to buy bonds, from my understanding of the story, which was the debt coming out of Ukraine in 2013 and 2014. This is the pyramid of basically laundering.
Franklin Templeton was a major donor. The owner, Mr. Templeton, was a major donor to the Obama campaign.
Right.
And they have other connections to the Barack Obama administration. Thomas Dolan, who also has a large, basically, holding in Franklin Templeton, was managing director of BlackRock. He also was President Obama's national security advisor. So you go back to that National Security Council, which is now being used to basically try to impeach the President of the United States. Barack Obama's national security advisor may have actually had a tie with this pyramid scheme.
There's something incredibly corrupt in Ukraine, and everything that's being done to take down Donald Trump is actually a frantic effort to hide the corruption that's in Ukraine that connects this corruption to Barack Obama and Joe Biden.
And the whole process here over the past 2 days in this story, as it's developed, it was first reported on Zero Hedge. We touched on it yesterday during the Godcast, but as the story has developed and we've been able to, view video of the actual announcement and everything, the fake news media has been driven into gear. NBC News came out with a story today basically saying that this story was fake news.
Yes.
Trying to dismiss it, basically saying, well, there was no indictment. What are you talking about? There was no indictment of the CEO of Burisma. There was nothing along that line that actually happened.
And they accused these two Ukrainian lawmakers of being disinformation agents and publicity seekers.
Well, it's funny. You look at the core of this. The NBC News story claiming to be, this watchdog. They don't mention that there was actually some document that was presented here. And again, the Prosecutor General of Ukraine actually confirmed that the owner of Burisma, Mykola Zlochevsky, that he is actually being investigated. So what they didn't note in this is that what was said by the two Ukrainian politicians was there is a criminal referral. They claimed because the initial story said he was charged, the whole story was fake. That's not the truth.
That's right. The NBC story, it refers to Ambassador Sondland, says, as Sondland testified, a misleading Ukraine story spread among conservatives on social media.
Right.
You mean like truth? Because that's really what this is about.
Right. So in that particular article, they basically dissed Zero Hedge. They dissed Charlie Kirk with Turning Point USA. They called Jack Posobiec a conspiracy theorist in this article because they were sharing it with people.
But Zero Hedge got it from
the source.
From the source in Ukraine. The main Zero Hedge didn't break the story.
Right.
Yeah.
They just reported on the press conference that was being streamed on the YouTube.
Interfax News in Ukraine is the one that released the story, and even Reuters picked it up.
Right.
Yes, and NBC story, Rick, something very interesting in that. They do note near the bottom, hidden at the bottom, that the owner of Burisma is actually missing right now. You think this would be something that is of note. The man who's now actually being looked at for 13 different criminal counts by the Prosecutor General of Ukraine, that he's missing, and on top of that, he is being investigated for ties to a $7.4 billion laundering scheme.
The Reuters article says, Ukraine widens probe against Burisma founder to embezzlement of state funds. So is NBC News saying that Reuters is part of a conspiracy theory?
Well, if you're basing it on the information that we received so far based on that press conference, then the answer is yes. They're calling Reuters fake news, too.
Think about this. They could have, with the multi-million-dollar budget that each of these main establishment outlets have, they could have taken the press conference like we did, translate it, look at the translation, and maybe show what was actually said versus doing this hit piece, this spin story on it. The core of it is the two lawmakers did present what appeared to be a leaked memo from the Prosecutor General's office, and then the Prosecutor General announced that they're expending charges.
So we have some video of the Ukrainian press conference?
Yes, we do. We have video of the specific moment that both Andrei Durkak and Alexander Dubinsky, both Ukrainian MPs, members of parliament, mentioned Hunter Biden and the others' connection to this scheme and laid out the pyramid scheme of laundering.
All right, let's watch it.
Important document. Why? This document has one important addition of Mr. Zolchevsky. From the Attorney General's office, Biden and partners received $16.5 million for services under Burisma. But what is the origin of the funds? In fact, what was done for this? This was done and rewarded by the son of Vice President Joe Biden for his services of criminally laundered money. Biden received the money, the source of which is not successful activity. This is money stolen from Ukrainian citizens. They were obtained by criminal means. So says the prosecutor general. Kramatorski, Court Justice Alexander Trebusha dealt with this topic.
So next, watch this. I've posted this before on my blog. This should be seen by people time and time again, just to show what sort of conspiracy theory people are involved in by pointing the finger at the Ukrainian government and corrupt oligarchs. Yeah, I mean, the mind boggles, really, it does.
I remember going over convincing our team, or others too, convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours. I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid at the time.
The true news people, because I just simply can't express it any better than myself. And I can't really think of anybody at the moment who could. So listen to this.
Why isn't that on CNN? Why isn't that on MSNBC? Why isn't that on the front page of every major newspaper in the United States of America? I mean, we have an impeachment process underway right now accusing President Trump of some kind of impeachable offense involving Ukraine. And the only thing the man was doing was trying to get to the bottom of the corruption involving Barack Obama and Joe Biden.
The very thing that we're talking about here today.
So what we have now, Doc, is that we've reached a point in America that the corruption is so embedded in our system that if anybody is elected president who attempts to investigate political corruption, that president will be removed from office. Do we understand what's going on here?
No, that's it, and that's absolutely it. You think about it, it's an established fact now that Hunter Biden, the son of the former Vice President of the United States of America, Joe Biden, was receiving money from Burisma. And this is from Reuters. I'll quote from them directly. The Prosecutor General, Ruslan Ryboshampka of Ukraine, said that theft of government funds on an especially large scale happened from the owner of Burisma.
That's coming from Reuters.
That's corruption. I'd say that is corruption in a nutshell.
And that's the Attorney General. His title is Prosecutor General. It's like the Attorney General of Ukraine.
Yes, the top justice official in that country.
And he's saying money from criminal enterprises flowed through Burisma Energy. And some of that money went to the Bidens. And there's implications that money went to the Democratic National Committee, that it was being laundered through Templeton into the United States. See, there's something in Ukraine that's really corrupt, something that the Democrats have been doing in Ukraine that they are terrified that Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump are on to their trail of crime. That's what they're terrified about. And so what the Democrats do is that they accuse you of doing what they have been doing.
Right.
That's their favorite defense.
It's right out of the Communist Party playbook, too.
Absolutely. So, but we're back to what I was saying a minute ago, the corruption that what we're being told as the American people is that you cannot investigate corruption now.
You have to accept it. You have to be quiet. You have to leave it alone for the next election to basically handle.
But nobody will ever bring it up. If this is allowed to go down without the public challenging the corrupt people and demanding accountability, nobody in the next 100 years will ever investigate corruption in the U.S. government. Over the years, I'm not picking on Mexico, but we all know that Mexico has drug cartel corruption in the government. It doesn't mean that every Mexican official is corrupt. There's a lot of good Mexican officials who've tried to stop it, and what happens to them?
They get killed, they get hurt, they get threatened.
They get bumped off. And so we read these stories like, Mexican judge assassinated, Mexican senator, shot in his car by drug cartel. And we shake our head and go, wow, how did Mexico ever get to the point that the drug cartels have so much power that they can kill judges, shoot senators, intimidate governors, kidnap the children of governors? How did Mexico get to this point? When good people do not challenge corrupt people, that's what happens. And where we're at right now in America is that corrupt people are telling honest people, you are not permitted to investigate us.
Right. That you're not allowed to even look behind the curtain at all. You're not allowed to even question that there might be something wrong, something going on.
Our corruption is the law of the land.
This would be, this would be like back in the Old West days in America, Jesse James orchestrating the impeachment of the sheriff because the sheriff was investigating bank robbery.
Yeah.
And then the sheriff gets arrested and put in jail for alleged bank robbery.
Right. That's exactly right.
That's what we have going on here. That President Trump is being unduly maligned and accused of corruption, impeachable offenses, and the only thing he was doing was pursuing allegations that the Bidens and the Obamas were involved in massive corruption in Ukraine. And he had every right to withhold funds. As an American, I applaud him. If he did, if I were Donald Trump, I would come out and say, yes, I did tell them to withhold the funds, and here's why. Maybe he's waiting for that opportunity, that he's just letting this, play out its course, but he should not be timid about defending his position. His position was right. Everybody knows that Ukraine is corrupt. Everybody knows it has a history of corruption.
Right.
And as an American citizen, we give hundreds of millions of dollars every year to corrupt countries. It comes out of the pockets of the American people, and we give it to these corrupt governments. And we wonder why doesn't somebody in Washington ever demand accountability? Well, when they do, this is what happens.
Right.
So who is defending President Trump? I don't see very many Republicans lining up to defend him. On this case, he's right.
Well,
when he's wrong, I criticize him. When he's right, I defend him. He's right on this issue. And what they're doing to him is deplorable.
It's a political lynching, as you've laid out previously. And to your point about the Republicans, how many Republicans have brought up CrowdStrike during the course of the 4 days of these impeachment hearings? I've only heard it once, and it was from a Democrat who tried to paint it as a conspiracy theory. The president would even mention CrowdStrike and the DNC in Ukraine in the same sentence.
I know. Look, what we have here, it's President Trump is, sadly, he is surrounded by treacherous men and women. I keep hearing that word, treachery, treacherous men and women. And everywhere he turns, They're treacherous men and women. I mean, you had Fiona Hill, which was on his National Security Council, and she's backstabbing him.
Right.
She's attacking Republicans. She's in her testimony warning Republicans not to spread conspiracy theories.
Now, wait a minute. Today, what she actually did in her testimony, she actually chastised the Republican senators about, all right, now we don't want to get away from the idea that the Russians interfered with the election, and anybody that would suggest that the Ukrainians interfered with the 2016 elections, that is just way out there. That's just conspiracy theory stuff. Well, people must have short memories in Washington, D.C., because back in 2016, there were dozens of articles about the Ukrainians interfering with the election, that they were tying election interference back to servers in the Ukraine, including left-leaning outlets like Politico. I mean, you can look it up yourself. I mean, go back to 2016, do a search for Ukraine, and you're going to see...
Fiona Hill now says if you say that, you believe in conspiracy theories.
Right.
But if you say the Russians didn't interfere, then you're also believing in conspiracy theories, because she promotes that conspiracy theory.
Right. So you've got to line up and say it's the Russians that were involved and not the Ukrainians, in spite of the fact that they can trace the election interference, any election interference, at least on the online stuff, to the Ukraine.
Well, think about one of the two figures that never get talked about when we discuss Ukraine and the 2016 election. Remember John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign chair? Remember Tony Podesta, who actually worked on the same contract that Paul Manafort is now gone to jail for? Tony Podesta and John were allowed to register as foreign agents. They're allowed to retroactively register, but Mr. Manafort, he's in jail.
Yeah.
For doing the same thing.
Yes.
Very same thing.
Because the Democrats have been doing something very corrupt out of Ukraine. And it's yet to be seen whether it will be exposed, whether Donald Trump is going to be removed from office for daring to investigate what they were doing. But this is serious. This is literally at the heart of our republic. Because if this is allowed to continue, there's no hope for the republic.
There won't be another fair election. There won't be another fair attempt at any business, any action. We won't have any form of just government in this country.
You look at people like Colonel Vindman. Right, he's a Ukrainian, right? Yeah. Has anybody dared to say, do you have any connections to Ukraine? You are a Ukrainian.
You speak Ukrainian. You were born in Ukraine. You speak Russian.
Yeah. Do you have any connections, Colonel Vindman?
And did you hear the story that we covered yesterday, that he was offered the defense ministry position 3 times?
This year. This year. Earlier this year, he was offered defense ministry. Yes, yes.
We did that.
Vindman.
Defense ministry in Ukraine?
Yes.
You got to be kidding.
No, he brought it up. He laughed about it during the hearings.
Oh, my.
Yeah. So is there, a conflict of interest there? Well, I would say there was.
Why would the Ukrainian... So Zelensky offered him defense minister?
Actually, the National Security Council advisor, the one that actually resigned about a month or so
ago. Of Ukraine,
Danyuk, he offered Vindman the job.
3 separate occasions.
Why would Vindman be known to Ukraine?
Well, he actually went with now the Secretary of Energy, Rick Perry, to the inauguration. And in addition to this, think about this. Where did the push to get the military aid to Ukraine first originate? Well, it's the National Security Council. This would have been something Vindman worked on.
Guys, this really stinks. This stinks really bad. Vindman's up to his eyeballs in this corruption.
Oh, we agree with you on that. And so the stories that have been developing this week regarding Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, and you got to call him Lieutenant Colonel, right?
You do.
Because he wears the uniform. But
just not on trips to Ukraine.
Yeah. So, but
how about Lieutenant Corrupt Colonel Vindman?
But yes, he was offered.
He's corrupt.
He was offered the defense ministry position 3 separate times, which isn't that shocking because other cabinet positions in the Ukraine were given to people who can't even speak Ukrainian. Remember that story that we've done as well. So, but
well, you know what? The other thing I was thinking about with Vindman. Both of you men served in U.S. military.
Mm-hmm.
Who is the highest ranking officer of the U.S. military?
Oh, the commander-in-chief.
Yes.
And who's the commander-in-chief?
President Donald J. Trump.
Is that just a paper title?
No, his picture is in every office, in every building.
The president is the commander-in-chief.
When you're taught the chain of command, you're taught all the way up to the president.
It starts with the president.
Vindman is in an act of sedition and insubordination to his commanding officer.
I agree with you on that.
He should be removed. President Trump should remove Vindman from the military.
And maybe put this man under his own truck. Because if it comes out he worked with CIA operative Eric Ciaramella, the reported whistleblower, this is a military intelligence coup.
I would absolutely back President Trump if he removed Vindman from the U.S. military for sedition and insubordination. I don't know if he'd go that far. But, President Trump, if you don't take some serious action, these people are going to chew you up. You're going to have to stand up to them. I'm puzzled about what his strategy is. What President Trump's... I don't get what his strategy is. I mean, I can sit here and see the strategy of the Democrats. It's very obvious.
The Democrats are probably waiting for him to do something like that.
Yeah.
Let's say, for instance, he did remove Lieutenant Colonel Vindman for whatever reason. They would use that as,
of course, they would,
impeachable offense.
I'd say, bring it on, baby. Bring it on. Let's get this fight going. Bring it on. That's what he's going to have to do.
He has got to realize at this point, if he doesn't, the National Security Council, how many Vindmans are there? His twin brother, he's the ethics officer there, so we know the standard.
Wait, there's two Vindmans?
Yeah, no, his twin brother is also lieutenant colonel, and he's actually the ethics officer who oversees the activities, one such being an offer of a defense ministry position to someone in the National Security Council.
How does this stuff happen? Two brothers from Ukraine are in the National Security Council of the United States of America.
Offices across the hall from each other.
Well, Fiona Hill, she wasn't born in America.
Right.
She didn't become an American citizen until 2002. How do these people born in another country come to the United States and end up in the National Security Council when Americans can't get in the National Security Council? How does this happen? Now, she is a member of the CFR. And I think what we've got going on here now is that we are clearly being told, as the American people, that foreign policy of the U.S. government is the sole property of the Council of Foreign Relations.
They're basically the ones that set the agenda and say, this is what we're going to be pushing.
Well, that's what Hillary Clinton said. Remember, Hillary Clinton said she got her marching orders from the CFR and then brought it into the State Department.
So people like Vindman, Fiona Hill, Sondland, all these guys, everyone that's testified against Donald Trump, what they're saying is the President of the United States does not have the right and the authority to set foreign policy.
Well, that's what Ambassador Taylor said. Remember, he said, I have my own set policy by the National Security Council that I follow, that in time actually supersedes the directive of the President.
That's what I mean. So we have a shadow government that's run by the CFR. The CFR controls the foreign policy of the United States of America. And the President is being told you cannot alter the CFR ordained foreign policy. And if you do, we're coming after you. This is what we have presented to us right now as the American people. So if they're allowed to get away with this, Edward, no future president will ever be able to change foreign policy. I mean, why even run for president? You can't change anything.
It's just a figurehead position. You're absolutely right, Rick. I mean, at this point, who's in charge of our nuclear arsenal? Who's in charge of our military? We know the CFR, we know the National Security Council doctrine. They want war. Specifically, they want war with Russia, which really is the emphasis, the genesis of this whole probe, is that we were trying to give weapons to Ukraine in the progression of continuing this civil war in that country with the goal of inciting Russia towards some kind of action that would justify us maybe launching an expanded war.
Look at what's happening with the Navy and President Trump. So President Trump, remember what he did a few days ago with Eddie Gallagher, all right?
Yes.
Special Operations SEAL, all right? And the president acquitted him of war crimes, gave him presidential pardon.
Canceled his demotion in rank.
All right? Well, the Navy said no.
No, they went and did it their way.
Against the commander-in-chief.
Right. And I don't understand that, Rick. How can you do that?
Doc, this is sedition. This is what I'm saying. The country is being ripped apart by sedition. Sedition is from Satan. It is a satanic spirit.
Right.
Never allow the spirit of sedition to operate in your life. Sedition is working against the established order, against the ordained leader of an organization, a government, a church. I mean, people that work in a church to undermine the pastor, get the pastor fired. Okay, that's sedition.
Right.
Employees that gather, in the lunchroom and bad mouth and talk against the CEO. That's sedition. And what the Democrats are doing, it's not just the Democrats, because the Republicans they're all treacherous, lying snakes. They're practicing the spirit of sedition. And they're undermining the elected executive of the United States of America. And now it's showing up in the military, where military leaders are saying, we're not going to follow your command. But we've seen this. We saw it with General Mattis.
Yes, I mean, the troops are still in Syria. I mean, how many times did we try to withdraw the soldiers? The 28 to 2,000, now up to 4,000 have been deployed to Saudi Arabia. The military is running their own policy, their own command.
What about the president's command about transvestite troops? And the military just overturned him.
Right.
They didn't implement his policy. So this is pervasive. It's not just this Ukraine issue. It's almost anything that Donald Trump says, this is my policy, this is what I'm doing. There's a faction in various departments of the U.S. government that considers itself the resistance. Well, you're resisting the will of the people. The people elected the president. You're resisting the established order of the republic. It can't function like this. So, I know the Democrats, they don't think this way. So if a Democrat is elected in 2020, do we then practice sedition against the Democratic president?
Oh, no, that's not allowed.
Yeah, they would have us arrested, wouldn't they?
That's right.
Charged with sedition. But that's the precedent they're setting. They're saying these are the new standards. We can undermine a president. We can have military officers refuse to obey an order.
Now think about if you're Vladimir Putin and you're looking in on the United States and you see members of the military that are disobeying the orders of the commander-in-chief. You've got a split military. You've got a division running down. Who knows how deep throughout the at least at the top. You've got a division that's
and you
going
don't
on.
know who's in control of the nuclear arsenal.
Right. So if you're Vladimir Putin and you don't know who's got their finger on the button that could destroy them, I mean, you've got to be prepared for any kind of scenario, and he is preparing himself for
it
that.
is, Doug, and for Mr. Putin or Xi Jinping, this issue cuts both ways, because the instability of the situation in America makes them think, would the military carry out President Trump's order to nuke Russia or China, or would they refuse to carry out an order?
And if you don't know which way they're going to go, how do you protect yourself?
Preemptive strike?
That's right.
I think
You do a preemptive strike, because it's so unstable. It's so unstable that it's threatening to the entire world. That the most armed nuclear power in the world is falling apart because of insurrection and sedition inside the U.S. government. And the news media is part of it. The Democratic Party is part of it. There's a substantial portion of the Republican Party that is part of it. The military-industrial complex is part of it. A big chunk of the intelligence agencies is part of it. A big chunk of the Pentagon is part of it. And the CFR is definitely part of it. This is insurrection. And the country can't survive like this. I mean, we're going to split up. You know, you're talking about two factions in the military. Well, that's what you had, you know, in 1861.
Right.
Ulysses S. Grant and Robert E. Lee were friends.
That's right. In fact, you know, it was Robert E. Lee that he served the Union Army all the way up until Virginia left the Union.
Yes. So this is how a civil war starts, and the military splits. I mean, do we understand that in the Civil War of the United States of America, the United States military split?
Right.
Do we understand that?
It wasn't just the government that split, but the military.
The military. Some generals said, we're going to fight against Washington. Other generals said, we're going to fight against the South. But the U.S. military split, and generals were fighting generals. All right, soldiers were fighting soldiers up from the same military.
Right.
This is where they're driving our nation. You're going to have these Vindmans, these treacherous, evil, wicked men like Vindman, leading troops against the rest of the military. This is where we're going. You're going to have a civil war in the military. You've got people in the military saying, we're going to overrule the president's decision on Eddie Gallagher. Okay, there's going to be a military. You're going to have factions of the U.S. military fighting other factions of the U.S. military. Yes. That's what's called a civil war. That's why what these people are doing is so dangerous and deplorable.
And can you imagine having an election during something like that? Can you imagine going to the grocery store? I mean, we're talking about an end of civility, an end of regular society in this country, let alone the TV impeachment hearings that people are watching. This is reality. What you're discussing isn't just an end to the country. It's bloodshed in families and communities and cities across this nation.
Going back to our Ukraine story, Rick, the president's lawyer, personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, has actually fingered the person that he believes has influenced U.S. diplomats in Ukraine for quite a while. And he puts the finger on none other than George Soros.
Yeah, he was on Glenn Beck's Blaze. I think was it yesterday or today? He just laid it out and said, it's George Soros. Working
with an established Democratic Party group in Ukraine, specifically Alexander Chalupa. Remember the one that was involved again in the dossier/other, what we consider to be interference, right?
Chalupa is connected to Eric
Jaramella, the CIA whistleblower. It's a big circle here, and especially if it goes back to Mr. Vindman.
We have a faction in the U.S. government, active duty. We got both active duty and retired or people have gone into civilian work, but people in the National Security Council, in the CIA, in the FBI, in the Pentagon, in various intelligence agencies, in the news media, they are leading a coup against the elected president of the United States. And I'm at the point now, these people are enemies of the Republic. You can't just say, we have political disagreements. No, you're an enemy of the Republic.
Because you're working to actively bring down the established order.
Vindman should be removed from the military. I mean, Donald Trump's going to have to clean house, or they're going to clean his house.
Right.
Because they have no intentions of stopping until he is driven out. Didn't you see Ken Starr?
Yes.
You know, the fake prosecutor during the Clinton scandals back in Bill Clinton's days. I mean, that was the biggest fake investigation, Ken Starr.
Especially the Vince Foster case.
Yeah. And so Ken Starr, he came out and he said, we've reached a point. We've reached that point where the Republican senators are going to have to get in a vehicle and drive over to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and tell Donald Trump to resign. Really? Seriously? Over what? Over wanting to investigate the corruption of the Bidens and the Obamas in Ukraine? We're not even investigating the Clinton corruption.
Right. And the espionage that went right to the Oval Office.
Yes.
And Ken Starr knew that.
Yes.
He knew, and he knew the source behind it.
Yes.
And he Knew he couldn't go that
Kinstar
far.
never investigated Bill Clinton selling American national security secrets to China. The whole investigation was fake. And the Republican Senate went along with the whole fake investigation. All right, so you got the impeachment. Okay, it's all fake. The whole thing's fake. It was all smoke and mirrors. The Monica Lewinsky thing was the sideshow, the circus sideshow, so that nobody saw what Bill Clinton was doing in selling secrets. And so if anybody, after the impeachment drama, if anybody brought up China and said, hey, he needs to be impeached.
And so we've done that.
Well, we've already had an impeachment. And
Well, why would we have another one?
right. That's how they did it. We have another video here. What is this one here with... let's go to Rudy Giuliani. You just mentioned him. So we've got this soundbite from Glenn Beck, Rudy Giuliani. So this is what
Number 5 for control.
Number 5. This is Rudy Giuliani on Glenn Beck's Blaze.
She was working out what the Anti-Corruption Bureau is a contradiction. The Anti-Corruption Bureau was set up by George Kent, who was one of the witnesses here.
Yep.
I mean, when I was looking at him, I was like in shock that he's still at the State Department. But George Kent set up this bureau. They took all the corruption cases away from the prosecutor general. They gave it to the Anti-Corruption Bureau, and they got rid of all the cases that offended Soros, and they included all the cases against Soros's enemies. One of the first cases they dismissed was a case in which his NGO, Antac, was supposed to have embezzled a lot of money, but not only that, collected dirty information on Republicans to be transmitted, gotten by Ukrainians, to be transmitted to this woman, Alexandra Chalupa, and other people who worked for the Democratic National Committee.
So
The first case that Lutsenko tanked was that case at the request of the ambassador.
There's enough in that phone call to launch a real investigation, let alone the president's phone call with Vladimir Zelensky. I mean, what he's alleging here is on par with what we spoke about at the beginning of the program. Another pay-for-play scheme of corruption.
How many George Soros flunkies are in the U.S. government? How many does he have embedded in government agencies?
He's got $1 billion to invest. I suppose it's a lot.
Covering for them. Look, President Trump's one of his first mistakes when he was elected is in that transition stage. One of his first mistakes was he did not make Rudy Giuliani the Attorney General. We all thought Mayor Giuliani was going to be the Attorney General. It ends up being Jeff Sessions. How did that happen? Rudy Giuliani didn't get any position. Who convinced President Trump between the election and the inauguration not to appoint Rudy Giuliani as Attorney General? Who did that?
Well, let's go back in time to 2016, ramping up the campaign. There was a different Jeff Sessions then.
Yes.
There was a Jeff Sessions says, yeah, we'll investigate Hillary Clinton.
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to go after this. And then he gets in office and does this.
But nobody was thinking of Jeff Sessions as Attorney General.
Right.
That wasn't even on the radar. People were thinking he'll be running Immigration Service, ICE. They'll put Jeff Sessions in ICE.
No, right, Department of Homeland Security. He's not Attorney General.
Right.
Look, the people that were making decisions, the recommendations to the president, were that Tiger team. Remember, which involved Jared Kushner, Vice President Mike Pence, Ira Greenstein, the owner of Genie Energy, and Anthony Scaramucci. Those individuals were interviewing and making recommendations. The president likely made a recommendation either obviously against Giuliani and for Mr. Sessions.
The only person who has been investigating the corruption that's being used against Donald Trump has been Rudy Giuliani. Had he been the Attorney General all along, he would have been using the power of the Justice Department to go after these corrupt Democrats.
But as the president's personal attorney, he has access that and a means that he wouldn't have had as an attorney general.
Doc, where the Democrats are using this against him is saying you have no legal authority to be going to Ukraine.
And it makes it look like the president is doing things to benefit him personally.
But had he been the Attorney General of the United States saying, look, I have information that billions of dollars of criminal money has been laundered into the United States through an American-based investment firm. and that the vice president's son, Joe Biden's son, and his partners were paid $16.5 million from criminal funding. See, the Attorney General could be doing that. Somebody talked Donald Trump into not appointing Rudy Giuliani. Well, when you didn't get Rudy Giuliani as the Attorney General, the next thing that was done was somebody convinced Donald Trump to appoint Rod Rosenstein as the Deputy Attorney General. And what did that hissing snake do?
The Mueller special investigation. We can thank Mr. Rosenstein for that.
So Jeff Sessions did a lay down, and he just steps aside and says, I'm out of this case. Rod, you take it. Rod Rosenstein says, hey, I'm appointing a special prosecutor. Who convinced Donald Trump to put Rosenstein in? That's where if you go all the way back, this is where the takedown really started to pick up speed. They had to get their people in key power. That's what I say. Donald Trump is surrounded by treacherous men and women. I don't know if he's figured this out yet, but the very people he's hanging out with are snakes.
How could he not have figured this out by now, Rick?
I don't know. Unless
he's me.
Yeah, unless he's figured it out, and it's like he's shocked at how corrupt that these people are, that he doesn't know who to trust now. But he's been taken down this road by people inside. I mean, he was led with a hook in the nose down this road by people inside his organization, inside his administration.
Right.
He had enemies, treacherous, seditious, plotting enemies inside the Trump administration that he didn't realize were actually working to take him down.
He had them all the way back in the campaign. That's where they started.
Yes. They were embedded in the campaign. It is mind-blowing. It's just stunning to believe, to understand what's going on here. Okay, we'll move on to this. Hunter Biden, there's another story that's not getting any press. He's got a love child to a 28-year-old woman in Arkansas. Her name, London Roberts, demanding child support for the baby.
And Secret Service
protection, because the baby is the grandchild of the former Vice President of the United States.
Right. Now, this isn't just speculation anymore. They've got DNA now. Mm-hmm. They've proven this now, that there is he is the father of this child.
At least we got one investigation into Hunter Biden going.
But why isn't somebody talking about it? You can read about it in the British papers, but you can't read about it in the American papers.
The thing with Hunter Biden...
Is this a conspiracy theory?
No, this is a conspiracy
Is this fake
fact.
news? Is it fake news?
Fact.
Is this fake news? Is there a baby or not?
There is a baby, and it's real.
And it's Hunter Biden's baby.
Right.
Right?
I mean, Hunter Biden it seems like he can get away with anything. He can have cocaine and a handgun and a rental car. He can, hook up with his dead brother's wife. I mean, he gets away with everything. And yet Joe Biden comes along, gives him a great big old hug and everything, and the news meter never touches Hunter Biden. Never, or if they do interview him, it's like, oh, poor Hunter Biden. He's had a pretty rough life and everything, especially since his brother died, and he's the son of the vice president. Make him a victim. So,
but the media covers up for him.
Yep.
They always provide the cover for him. They never investigate. And if organizations like us, if we talk about it, then we're accused of spreading fake news.
Right.
Well, right. Wasn't it the Biden campaign themselves that sent out letters to the main television networks saying, do not talk about Joe Biden or Burisma? That's a conspiracy theory, and we will not allow you to interview the potential candidate for president if you do.
Why do you think the FBI is interviewing the whistleblower?
Well, he's at the core of the biggest investigation in the country. And I think specifically it may be in relation to his security clearance. There are many issues related to Eric Charmel, especially if he helped, let's say, Mr. Vindman with leaking documents, usurping the president's power, maybe even putting the president at risk. Because we don't know the extent. Remember, there were phone calls which were released between other world leaders and President Trump early in the campaign, in the presidency rather. Did we ever learn who leaked those? We just assumed it might have been a cabinet official. We know Eric Charmella was in the White House at the time of the release of those phone calls.
The FBI investigating a CIA agent.
Yes.
Where do you think that's going to go?
Well, Doc, I don't know. I don't know whether the CIA, the FBI is involved to help him or whether they're on the trail of something. Is the FBI I mean, it would be shocking to think that the FBI would actually be investigating the flow of corrupted money from Ukraine.
So let's step back from that just a second here. Here we are. We're discussing America 2020, or almost 2020 now. We're discussing the fact that different intelligence agencies, a domestic intelligence agency is investigating our foreign intelligence agency, and we can't trust either one of them.
No.
So that's us looking inside here. Imagine someone looking from the outside. Imagine another foreign power, China. By the way, China is the new enemy of NATO. You heard this today,
Yes,
right? So even though China is nowhere near the Atlantic, it's now the new enemy of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Once again, we're back to Council on Foreign Relations.
Right.
They determine foreign policy, which is, and it's much bigger because we know the most dominant force that's in U.S. foreign policy, but it's all run through CFR.
And the CFR is the center of this impeachment inquiry. If you think about Joe Biden, where did he make the admission that he'd pressured the Ukrainians?
At the CFR.
At the CFR. Where did our former CIA director end up speaking quite a few times after leaving office? John Brennan is a CFR affiliate also. The CFR, the FBI, and the CIA, they're in basically a handshake with this operation to undermine the president.
We have that video, don't we?
Yes, we do. I pulled it just because it's very important for me to see
we need to
this.
watch it again because, see, this is something that ought to be shown to the American people multiple times on
This
the news
was
networks.
the quid pro quo.
Yes.
It's not a conspiracy theory. Listen to Joe Biden say it himself.
And he said it to the CFR.
Right.
Bragged about it.
But you see why he could brag? He was at home.
Right.
He was with the boys. They would applaud. They would laugh.
They are his countrymen.
That's Joe. He took care of it. He did what we told him to do.
Right.
So he wasn't being cautious with his words because he was in front of an audience that expected him to do those things.
Right.
So this was what, 2018?
Yes, in
Joe
January
Biden
2018.
at the Council on Foreign Relations, and he's bragging that he threatened to withhold U.S. foreign aid to Ukraine until they fired the prosecutor who was investigating the company that was paying millions of dollars to his son.
That's definitely quid pro quo.
But why isn't Joe Biden in handcuffs? This is like Alice in Wonderland. Like the Mad Hatter is running the world. Like, here's the crook. He's admitting it. And yet Donald Trump is being accused of doing what Joe Biden bragged that he did. All right, let's watch the video. Here it is.
I remember going over convincing our team, or others too, convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid at the time.
It sounded to me like he said that he threatened the Ukrainian government that if they did not fire the prosecutor within 6 hours,
Yes.
they would not get the $1 billion in U.S. aid.
Loan guarantees, I believe. And if you think about it, wasn't that what the two Ukrainian lawmakers were alleging as part of this scheme? That there was a loan buyback plan, basically a fraudulent loan buyback plan involving a U.S. Democrat Party-connected investment firm.
Which most likely will be Templeton. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Your brain has to work overtime to maintain sanity in their world of false reality. Because this is what we're living in. We're living in a false reality.
Well, they're gaslighting us. They're gaslighting us with this. Their crimes are an open secret.